I am Vinnie Tortorich. Folks, your good intentions have been stolen. But don't worry, I'm here to help you get them back. You may be soft and succulent when we start this process, but don't worry, it won't take long. You pay attention, you listen to what we talk about here, you'll be lean and mean before you know it. This is the Friday show. You know what that means. That means I kind of get out of the way. I get an expert in here. I get a luminary, someone who really understands what they're talking about, and they drop the knowledge on us. And this guy is no different. By the way, if you're listening to this on audio, I am doing a video of this. We're going to do the video, so you can go to YouTube and see that. We just started putting those up a couple of weeks ago. See if we can't build up that audience. People have been asking me to do it for a long time. So what the hell? After over 1,800 some odd shows, I decided, why not? Give it a shot. So if you guys want to see what Dr. Mitloehner looks like, you can go over there. Ladies, I don't know if he's married, but he's a piece of all right. Folks, we talk a lot about, cows burping, cows farting, and we have 16-year-olds telling us we should be ashamed of ourselves. How dare you? How dare you? And we have all of this stuff going on. I'm just trying to get to the bottom of it, right? That's all. I don't have an agenda. I just want people to be healthy. And once we started getting people healthy, then I started looking around again. And I went, wait a minute. Now these vegans and PETA and everybody else, they have a different game going on. They're going, wait, yeah, you can lose weight on that meat, but it's killing the ozone layer, melting some ice up at the poles. Not a good idea. We'll be dead in 10 years. Boy, if I had a dime, I'm 58. If I had a dime for every time in my life someone told me the world was ending in 10 years, I would have a lot of dimes. Well, this guy is going to be here today to explain to us exactly what's happening. I'm hoping the planet is going to be here for longer than 10 years because I just bought a new car, and I usually keep them for at least 12. So we'll see if my car will make it all the way through. I'm talking about the guy. He did his graduate studies in animal science. He deals with air quality control. He's at UC Davis, California. I'm talking about Dr. Frank Mitloehner. How you doing, Frank?
Hi, I'm doing well. How are you?
I can't complain, Frank. I was talking about it up front. Every time, especially when I see a politician. Now, I don't do politics on this show, right? I don't care what anyone's politics are. If you like the orange man, good. If you like the guy who can't remember where he put his slippers, good. I don't care. I don't care where you are politically. It doesn't matter to me. All I care about is mankind, human beings, how we can all get along together. And, we seem to have this fight going on, right, with food. It's a food fight, Frank.
It is a food fight. That's what I call it too. Yep.
Yeah, and I'm looking around going, look, I don't care about your veganism. I don't care about, I just care about people being less sick. And it seems like ever since we started a food pyramid, ever since in 1978, when we stopped, when we decided meat was bad, and the McGovern committee, just said, okay, hands thrown up, more vegetables, less meat. By the way, you can have all the sugar you want. It seems like the wheels started to fall off of the cart, and that cart is barely limping along now. What say you?
Yeah, no, I agree with you. I'm not an expert on the nutrition side, but I do know that pretty much by the time the dietary guidelines rolled around, the first ones, that was also the time when we started our journey on to where we are today. We are not the healthiest we've ever been, but it's just the opposite. We have a real issue with metabolic disease, with diabetes and with all different kinds of food-related issues. Obesity rates are skyrocket high and so on. But I think that we have learned a lot about fat. We have learned a lot about protein. We have learned a lot about sugar. We do know that a lot of the obesity rates that we see today are caused by sugar and the whole insulin stuff. I don't need to tell you about that, but it seems like we're getting fat not because we're eating fat, we're getting fat because we're eating a lot of sugar, and our body readily puts that into fat.
Yeah, you don't know much about me, Frank, but I've done 2 movies about that where
Mhm.
we just talk about the history, and we don't even start with the food pyramid. We go back to the 1860s. We go back to the beginning. We go back to a religion who decided that, hey, the Seventh-day Adventist, a woman named Ellen G. White woke up one morning and said, you know what? God came to me in my sleep. Now, Frank, if you woke up tomorrow morning and you said to your best friend, hey, check it out. God came to me in my sleep last night. Your friend would be calling the guys in the white coats, right? It's like
Yeah.
Frank needs some help. Maybe he's been working too hard on his air quality control. I don't know, but he thinks he's talking to God. Well, in 1860, when someone said, God came to me, instead of calling the guys in the white coat, they went, oh, really? What did God have to say? Can you imagine that today? It's lunacy. And she said, well, God told me that number one, we should never masturbate, which, look, I'm an atheist, but if I was religious, I would pick one of the ones that allow masturbation at the very least, Frank, at the very least, right? But on top of that, God said, no more meat, no more meat. Can't have meat. If it's a sentient being, if it can look at you, you can't have it. If it has eyes, you can't eat it. That was the decree. And that was the beginning of modern day veganism. As you know, being a scientist, there was no way to do that back then because we hadn't discovered exogenous vitamins yet, right? We didn't even discover vitamins. We didn't know how they worked in the 1860s, right? We started discovering how vitamins worked in the 1910s and 1920s. But you couldn't be a vegan back then. You would have died, right? Now these idiots, that's the problem with modern day society, Frank. I've always said, that we can't have, we used to just have natural selection. People would get weeded out, right? Doesn't happen anymore. We started putting beepers on anytime big equipment backs up, so we're not losing them like that. We're keeping them alive. It just doesn't work anymore, right? It's like we're keeping the idiots alive. Well, now these idiots are going, look, I could be a vegan. No, you can't. If you had to live without your exogenous vitamins and all the other crap you have to take to almost be healthy, you could not be a vegan, right? So once we prove them wrong there, and once we get more people eating meat and staying off of sugar, and people start losing weight, then they start looking around and they go, it's not working anymore. We're going to have to do something else. And what do? They go, oh, you know what? They're killing the earth. And that's what we're going to get into, folks, right after I tell you about Bellcampo. I was giving an old sponsor, Bellcampo. As a matter of fact, our guest today, Frank, may know something about Bellcampo. It's up in his area, UC Davis area. Bellcampo has great grass-fed beef. They do it right. It tastes great. You could get the hamburger meat. You could get steaks. I get the ribeyes. I get I call it the strip, the New York strip. They have it all. The pork is great. I even get their bone broth. You want some great bone broth? Bellcampo. I keep saying the wrong sponsor here. Bellcampo. I don't know why that's
buy one, get one free. Clear.
Yeah. Don't go to that first one. Go to Bellcampo. And let me tell you why you want to go to Bellcampo. If you go to that first sponsor, you won't get any discount. You go to Bellcampo, you're going to get what? Oh, nothing. Just 20% off. They still have the 20% off discount. 20% off every time you go to Bellcampo. It's Anya Fernald's company. She's got a few restaurants around California. They are unbelievable. By the way, the meatballs are incredible. Go check it out. Bellcampo.com. When you get to checkout, put in promo code Vinnie, Vinnie. You'll get 20% off. I didn't say 5%. I didn't say 10%, 20% off. They actually lose money on that first order just to get you guys in the door. So, and by the way, if you spend more than $100, free shipping. That's a big savings when you're having meat come to your door. Bellcampo, promo code Vinnie, Vinnie. Go check it out right now. And so, Frank, walk me into this. I've had agronomists on the show, Peter Ballestat. I don't know if you know Peter. And, I talk to all these people and they say, look, we need to get the animals crapping on the land more because we're losing the topsoil. They talk about how the methane that they put off is actually regenerated. I'm hearing all this stuff. I don't really understand this. I'm in the health and fitness business. I need to understand this. You did something, and I'm hoping I might be giving this to you, and maybe I shouldn't have. Maybe I should have warmed you up to it. I saw online where you did a thing where you said, here's a sheet of paper. And then you folded the sheet of paper in half, and then you cut, and then you pulled out a business card. Can you describe that to the audience? Because that made so much sense to me.
Yeah, so I can even do it because
let's do it. We're videoing.
All right.
Let's take it away.
Let's be wild. Let's do it. Let's be wild. So, so I'm a little over 50, okay? A little bit over 50. When I was a little boy,
look it. You don't look
no, I know. But I am. And when I was a little boy, we had about 3 billion people in the world. 3 billion. Today we have 7.8 billion. And by the time I'm an old man, we'll have 9.5 billion. In other words, Vinnie, throughout my lifetime and yours, human population on our planet will have tripled. Wow. 3 times more people on our planet throughout our lifetime. But the natural resources to feed these people will not have tripled. Okay, they will not have tripled. They will, if we are lucky, be stable, relatively stable, but more likely decreasing over time. Okay, so that naturally brings into question how we feed all these people without depleting our natural resources, and what are the natural resources that we have. And I think for that question, the following depiction is quite powerful. So imagine that sheet of paper here being the surface of the Earth. Okay, this is the entire Earth.
Okay.
I now fold this paper, and I fold it twice until it's approximately postcard size. So that's what you see here.
So now, folks, if you're listening to this on audio, the paper is 25% of the size it was to begin with.
Correct. 1/4 postcard size. So what you see here, that postcard size piece of paper is all land in the world. The rest is water and ice. This is the amount of land. The rest is water and ice. So now, what I'm showing you now is my business card. And the equivalent amount of land that my business card represents is all agricultural land. So the 1/4 piece of paper, sheet of paper, is all land, and my business card is all agricultural land.
Okay.
So this is how much land we have in the world to grow food for people, okay? Whether we have 3, 7, 9, or 12 billion people in the world, that's how much land we have. So now I take my business card, and I fold it into one piece that's 1/3, and the other piece that's 2/3. And then I rip my own business card into pieces.
Okay.
So the larger of the 2 pieces is what's called marginal land. It's called marginal land because it doesn't have good soil quality. It doesn't have enough water. It might be too rocky or too hilly. It's not suitable, by and large, to grow crops there. So 2/3 of all agricultural land in the world is not used and cannot be used for crop production. What do we do on that land? Well, the only thing that grows there is cellulose-rich forage, such as grasses.
Okay.
And the only species that can digest that cellulose are ruminants. So that means cattle and sheep and goats, okay? 2/3 of all agricultural land in the world are marginal, and the only land use for food production purposes for that 2/3 piece of land is ruminant livestock. Without ruminant livestock, we could not make use of 2/3 of all agricultural land in the world, period. The remaining 1/3 of my business card is what's called arable land. And that's all the land we have available in the world to grow crops. So that's where you can grow crops for people, grow feed crops for animals, that's it. That's how limited we are. And by the way, and I find that interesting, half of these crops on this arable land piece are fertilized with chemical fertilizers, so-called synthetic fertilizers, which are quite energy intensive to be produced. And the other half is fertilized with animal manure, so-called organic fertilizer.
Right.
So without livestock, if we were to get rid of livestock in the world, we would not make use of 2/3 of all agricultural land, the so-called marginal land, and we would have to replace half of all fertilizers that are currently in the form of organic fertilizers with chemical fertilizers. It would have a very large negative effect. I'm not even talking about the impact that animal manure has when it's deposited by grazing animals on grazing lands, what that does to soil quality, what it does to soil health, what it does to soil carbon sequestration. We can talk about all of that, of course, if you so wish. But what's really important here is that this 2050 challenge of feeding a growing human population really requires us to do the best job we can by using all the land that we have available to us on the agricultural side, and livestock, particularly ruminant livestock, are an incredibly important piece of the puzzle.
This seems like, and you tell me, Frank, it seems like settled science. Like this is not something, we know these are facts, right? The amount of land we have for, everything you just described, right?
Yeah.
That is not debatable. Is that correct?
Yeah, but what some people do is they use the narrative in a different way. So what they say is the majority of agricultural land in the world is used for livestock. And that's bad because livestock only produces 18% of all calories. So that's the narrative they are setting. But that is very, very, it's incorrect and it's confusing to the listeners, because what that suggests is that we are very wasteful with the land that we use by putting livestock on it, when indeed you can't do anything else with it. Okay, you cannot do anything else with these 750,000 ranches we have in the United States. 750,000 ranches. On average, they have 50 cows on them, okay? This is where at least 2/3 of the life of each bovine is spent on a ranch. And then later for the finishing, they go into feedlots, but the vast majority they spend on rangeland. And while they are there, they are using land that could not be used to grow any other food.
So when I hear these vegan, I don't know what to call them, but let's just call them the vegans for short, that are out there yapping that, they're tearing down rainforests to graze cattle and sheep and goats, and that's what they're doing. And is there any truth behind that? Where are they hearing this information? I mean, what's going on out there?
So first of all, I want to be very clear. To me, a food choice is as individual and as much of your personal decision making as your religious choice or your partner choice or whatever it might be, your political choice, voting and so on. So I will never tell people what to eat one way or another. But my problem is that some of those folks you're talking about are trying to tell me what to eat. And that's when they're overstepping, okay? Particularly if they try to use rules and regulations and taxation and so on to force me to eat what they think I should eat. So that's really where they're overstepping. They're using some of this fear-mongering around deforestation. The food that you eat here, particularly the beef that you eat here in the United States, has nothing to do with deforestation in the Amazon. Nothing, zero. Because first of all, our beef doesn't come from there. We have less than 1% of imports from Brazil. But secondly, so the vast majority of the beef that we eat here is either grown here or imported, some of the lean cuts from places like Argentina and other places where grazing is happening, and where that meat then augments some of the stuff that we need for our burgers here, for our burger patties. Now, back to your question on deforestation. Is that happening? The answer is yes, it is happening. Deforestation is happening to make room for growing soy, and also for grazing with cattle. I've seen it with my own eyes. I worked in Paraguay for about 9 months, and I saw a lot of the deforestation happening. Deforestation is a big problem, not just in Brazil and for soy and cattle, but also in Indonesia and in other places in Southeast Asia, where they grow, let's say, palm oil. That deforestation is a problem and it needs to stop. It needs to stop for any purpose, including cattle. We don't need to cut those trees down, burn those trees down to make place for new additional agricultural uses, because we have enough land that oftentimes is degrading because we're not taking enough good care of the soils. Instead of taking down trees, we should really go back to the degraded lands and get them back into good shape. And then we don't have to do that.
Pretend I'm in second grade, Frank, and you're going to explain to me what happens when we rip apart a rainforest. What does that do to the planet? What does that do to our atmosphere? Why do we care?
Yeah, so good thing you asked me, because I have a second grader at home and she asks me these kind of questions all the time. So rainforests are really special insofar that they have an incredible diverse population of animals and plants. So there are gazillions of different species over there, and many of them have not even been discovered. A lot of the things, let's say in the pharmaceutical world, things that become medication, for example, are a result of certain plants having certain components that will be found to be advantageous for our health and so on. So first of all, species diversity is incredible in these areas. These are natural biospheres that really should remain undisturbed. With respect to what it does to our climate, of course, these trees do, like all trees, like all plants, assimilate carbon from the air and then put that carbon into the ground where it belongs, where we want it to be. If we now take these trees down, then all that carbon that these trees had assimilated and sequestered during their lifetime is going up in flames and going into the atmosphere. So that is true. There is no question about that. What is not true is what some people say, which is that the cutting down of trees will lead to a situation where we are getting rid of the world's lungs. I even heard the British Prime Minister saying that, and that's complete baloney. The rainforests of the world produce very, very little oxygen. The vast majority of that comes from oceans. So that's a myth. But the whole issue around a changing climate is affected by deforestation.
You mentioned the Prime Minister. We have politicians. I saw it going around on Twitter just the other day. They're saying, well, Joe Biden wants to do away with meat, and this. And again, I'm not going to make this a left or a right thing, but why do politicians? I saw not long ago. It might have been a year ago. The mayor of New York, or maybe the governor of New York, Cuomo, was saying, we're going to do Meatless Mondays in school, and we're going to do all this stuff. So they're promoting the non-eating of meat. Look, whenever a young kid says, oh, the governor of my state says meat is bad, you're going to grow up thinking meat is bad. You don't have any other options. Kids only have to hear it once.
Yeah, that was
why are these politicians doing this?
Yeah. Well, good question. There are many motivations, I'm sure. Some of them I have looked into. So the mayor, it's actually the mayor of New York, who touted the Meatless Monday as a successful campaign to impact our climate. I've recently read a paper that described what would happen if the entire United States were to go Meatless Monday. We would reduce our carbon footprint by 0.3%.
So that's
It's
zero, basically.
Yeah, it's 0.3%. It's not zero, but it's very little. If the entire country were to go vegan, the impact on our carbon footprint as a nation would be 2.6%. An entire country going vegan, 2.6%, just to give you some general idea. So now to your question of the first thing about Biden, Biden never said that. He never said that. He put out a campaign to reduce greenhouse gases by 50%. Agriculture was not mentioned with respect to reducing from any particular sector. He wants to incentivize techniques and technologies and facilitate or intensify sequestration. Okay, he never said that we should reduce meat consumption by 90%, as was put out by some news stations, and that was fake news. Okay, the Biden
Well, it
administration
seems
didn't
like
say that.
most of it is fake news. It's that's what gets me. They do it
Well,
on both sides, and it drives me nuts. But
well, yeah, I mean, it's not always. For example, this New York mayor has indeed promoted this Meatless Monday campaign very hard. Some of his sponsors, some of his campaign donors are strong anti-animal agriculture groups that want him to say that, and he does say that. There are people with different motivations. I had a discussion with AOC 1.5 years ago when she said that if you want to reduce our impact on climate, then you need to stop flying and not eat burgers. Or no, she actually said, and we need fewer planes, and we need our cows to stop farting, something like that. Okay, something like that. I don't know exactly what she said, but it was along those lines. So I engaged on Twitter with her and was able to reverse some of that and have her take down some of that language. So I see this all the time. I'm on Twitter. GHG Guru is my handle. GHG stands for greenhouse gas, and I have a lot of discussions with politicians and with journalists and with all different kinds of interesting characters, I can tell you.
I have somewhat of a photographic memory, and I hope I'm not remembering this wrong. I want to say it was a white paper. Johns Hopkins put it out. Are you familiar with what I'm talking about? And they just went through and tried to rip everything you were doing apart. Are you familiar with that white paper?
Yeah, that was a.
I read it about a month ago, Frank, when I
it
first
was
heard your name,
it,
and I can't remember now.
it was very interesting. So I wrote a white paper, and then they saw that, and they wrote a response to that, and but they never sent it to me. They never sent that to me. A year after they put this on the internet, I, by total coincidence, ran into this, and I thought, what in the world is this? Why didn't they send that to me?
Right.
Why didn't they send that to me? But they never sent it to me. So I now found that, and so at that time it was too late to respond. It was written by people who are behind the Meatless Monday campaign. They actually were the ones inventing it, pretty much, and and they characterized, or they criticized, that I used EPA numbers to
Right.
depict the impacts of livestock, saying that livestock has more impacts than just the direct emissions from belching and manure, and that I knew that. They said I should know that, and why am I not talking about it? Well, if they had asked me directly and not just put it out on the web, they would have gotten an answer. And the answer is that if you want to compare different sectors of society, let's say transportation and power production and cement industry versus animal agriculture, if you want to compare those to one another, and people do this all the time, then you need to use the same methodology to quantify them, right?
Right.
So, and the EPA uses what's called direct emissions only. And these are the numbers I cited. That's an apples to apples comparison of different sectors of society. And that's why it's a fair comparison. But that's understanding that in addition to just manure and belching, there are other issues around environmental footprint of livestock that contribute to the environmental footprint. But that was not really what this whole thing was about. It was about a relative comparison. And I told the world, and I keep telling the world, that in the United States, 80%, 80% of all greenhouse gases are associated with fossil fuel sectors. such as cars, trucks, trains, planes, ships, power plants, and so on. 80%. And according to the EPA, 4% with animal agriculture. So it's not nothing, it's something, but it's certainly not what some of those activists put out as what they think is a major reason why we should change what we eat.
It's amazing that they get away with it. You know, it drives me nuts that, you know, you did a white paper and they responded online. They didn't come to you.
Right.
We're not talking about Fox News. We're not talking about CNN or MSNBC. We're not talking about fake news. We're talking about Johns Hopkins. Am I right? It was Johns Hopkins, right?
Yeah, it was Johns Hopkins, yes.
Yeah, that's not, you know, a fake news organization. That's a school of higher learning. It's a hospital. It's and do they not think for 1 second, or how do they let that be co-opted by their people? I mean, when I think of that, it's like, wow. I used to think of Harvard as being something special until I started looking into Walter Willett, and I went, oh wow, all of these guys are being bought. Hell, I'm getting ready to do my third movie. It's all about you. You would love my second movie, by the way. I get into some light Walter Willett. You should see what's coming out in the third movie.
I will definitely watch those. Yes.
Oh, I'm working on the third movie now because I'm going head on against vegans. I'm going head on against this industry, this fake meat industry, and I'm going to show how some of the meat industries, Tyson's Food and all these other companies are getting in there too. They're dropping billions into this because they see it as the future. And I'm looking around going, wait, this is Frankenfood. Is anyone looking at the truth? But whenever I see something against someone like you or anyone else, it's like, wait a minute, who wrote this? Johns Hopkins? Really? Who decided that this was okay? Did you ever get to the bottom of it, or can you get to the bottom of it, or do you even know or even care to know?
So if this had been some professor at another university, then they would have sent me a letter. Okay, they would have sent me a letter. So there were some people in their Meatless Monday campaign base who felt that they needed to discredit me and do this in a visible way, taking a pot shot. But I found it unprofessional to not address me directly. And that would have been the right thing to do, and that would have been the professional thing to do, and they chose not to do it. And so, but this thing is on the web, and so people read it and think, oh my God, there must be something going on there. So it's unfortunate, but I will not go to that level.
Folks, we're talking to Dr. Frank Mitloehner. I need to tell you guys that there's so many new people that listen to this podcast all the time. I know the old listeners are going to be like, wait, what's he talking about here? But I have a company. It's my company. It's called purevitaminclub.com. And just want, people will find that company sometimes and write to me, oh my God, I had no idea that, because folks are finding us different ways. It's not just from the Adam Carolla show anymore, or just stumbling across me on this, there's the movie and the book. And then when they figure out we have a vitamin company, they go, hey, I wish I had known. I wanted to support you. And that's how you could do it. purevitaminclub.com. Go check it out. There are deals. I don't have a Vinnie 10% number there or anything, but there are deals to be had if you do the subscription, if you do things like you bundle. We have a couple of bundles. The biggest bundle is you get the multivitamin, and you get the, magnesium together. There's a few different bundles, and you can put them together and save. So go check it out, purevitaminclub.com. You'll like what we have going on there. We're talking to Dr. Frank Mitloehner. Frank, as you can tell, this is all driving me crazy. I'm there doing movies about it. Someone on this side had to start talking about this because I got tired of just seeing lies out there. And you would be shocked at the number of people who try to advertise on the show that I won't allow to let them advertise, because I don't want people to come back and go, well, he's co-opted by the Beef Council. Oh yeah, the egg people have gotten to him. That's why he's saying what he's saying. I'm trying to keep these conversations pure. I'm trying to talk to guys like yourself. I'm not trying to be a Walter Willett who has Unilever injecting me with cash straight up the anus every time I look around. I'm not handing that cash out to my scientists to squint whenever they look at epidemiological
It seems like cows
studies.
can't catch a break.
Mm-hmm.
Is that on your end or my end?
That was on my end. That
Okay.
was on my end.
Oh, sorry.
I'm sorry.
I was like, whoa, what did I do? I didn't even press a button this time. Usually that's me, Frank. Yeah, but cows can't catch a break. And
Yeah.
Go on.
No. I'm sorry. That was very rude, but my device interrupted us. So.
Okay. But I look around and I'm like, well, just tell us the truth. Why am I the only guy? And I'm not the only guy. There's other guys, but why am I the only guy looking for the truth? Always trying to find the truth. And whenever I'm looking for that truth, it's always so plain and simple to me. When someone like Dr. Michael Greger, who wrote a book, How Not to Die, which is exactly the way to die if you followed any, when he says something like, eating one egg a week is enough to cause type 2 diabetes. And I'm sitting there going, okay, wait a minute.
Yeah.
I was at Tulane for a long time. I have a degree in exercise physiology and nutrition. And looked at eggs before. There's absolutely no sugar in an egg. I'm having trouble figuring this one out. And this guy's saying even one a week will cause type 2 diabetes. And then I look around and go, well, wait, he's lying about that. And you have other doctors going, oh, yeah. We got it. And in my last movie, I have Dr. McDougall, another vegan guy, staring straight into a camera saying that the way you get rid of type 2 diabetes and fatty liver disease is to eat straight sugar. It can actually lower the results of that. These people are lying, bold-faced lies. Yet when you do something like this, tell the truth, you have a major university, you have a major hospital, Johns Hopkins, coming after you, and you can't get that removed from the internet. How does that work?
Yeah, but I wouldn't say that you have a major university against you. There's a group of, a university is always a place with thousands of scientists and tens of thousands of students and so on. If you have a group of 2, 3, 4 people within a lab that writes something about someone else, and that's not the university doing it, it's a group of individuals who did it, and in my opinion, not very professional. That's just, but they have a right to do it. They can say what they want. And if I would choose to, I could respond, but I have other things to do. For example, this one here, I was interviewed a couple of days ago by a YouTuber, and he did a piece with me where he interviewed me for about 20 minutes or so. And then he put out a piece called Eating Less Meat Won't Save the Planet. And here's why. And check it out on YouTube. Eating less meat won't save the planet. And here's why. This thing within 24 hours had like 400,000 views or so. People are very interested in this topic. This is a hot topic, okay? People are concerned about climate. They're very concerned about climate. And there are activists saying it's all about what you eat. So if you eat an animal source, if you eat animal source foods, then that is the largest driver to our climate, to increasing temperatures. And if you want to reduce your impact, then all you need to do is go vegan. And that is complete baloney, okay? It is complete 100% baloney. And not just is it wrong, but in my opinion, it's dangerous because it sidetracks us from the real 800-pound gorilla things that affect our climate, and that's the use of fossil fuels.
But doesn't it seem like they have more media on their side? Because look, you take a guy like me.
Yeah.
One day I woke up and there was a Wikipedia. About 9-10 years ago, there was a Wikipedia. I had written a book. I had a popular podcast. I was doing all this stuff, and I'm going around talking to groups and organizations, and there's this big giant Wikipedia. And by the way, I started reading my own Wikipedia, and I was like, wow, man, this is a great world, because they got like 98% of it correctly. The only, I worked with a lot of celebrities in Hollywood for a lot of years, and there was only one. There was Michael Chiklis, who I'd never met. And they said, oh yeah, he trained Michael Chiklis. Never met them. That was about the only thing that wasn't right in my entire Wikipedia. They had my age. As a matter of fact, you don't know this, Frank, but my wife is a celebrity. She was a Bond girl in the movie The World Is Not Enough. She's been an actress for 45 years and a model before that and all this stuff. And, you know, on her Wikipedia, it said, oh, Vinnie is with Serena Scott Thomas and all of it. And as a matter of fact, my hometown had a Wikipedia, Donaldsonville, Louisiana. And I was considered one of the notable people that came from Donaldsonville, Louisiana. All of this happened just by me going on the internet. I didn't have to go do anything, right?
Yeah.
And
Mm-hmm.
all the information was correct.
Mm-hmm.
And then all of a sudden, one day, it was all gone. My Wikipedia was wiped out. If you went to Serena's page, I was wiped away from being her mate. If you went to the Donaldsonville thing, I was no longer a notable person who wrote a book, who wrote 2 books. You know, all of it was gone. So I had my attorney contact Wikipedia and said, hey, what's going on here? And they said, yeah, we couldn't substantiate anything about this guy. Not one thing. We couldn't, you know, and my attorney goes, well, he wrote a book. Yeah, but well, how do we know that? Well, it's on Amazon. Says who? Yeah, this is actually their attitude. Someone decided to wipe me off of the computer, right? They're trying to wipe guys like me away. Trying to think of it. I was talking to a British scientist that day. Can't remember which one. I'll think of it in a minute. But I was telling him about it before we started recording. It was like the second or third time he had been on my show. And he says, you know what? Mine got wiped out too, just the other day. Right? They're trying to take guys like me who are making noise and just wiping us away. Now, on the same day that mine got wiped out, I was put on something called Rational Wiki. It's not Wikipedia, it's some other kind of, and on Rational Wiki, it says that I believe in vitamin Wu. I'm a climate denier. I don't even know what that means. I deny that there's a climate. I'm not.
No, that means a climate denier is a person who doesn't believe climate change is happening.
Okay. Well, I can read. I can see it's happening. I've never said that. You know, I discuss it with people like you. I'm trying to get to the bottom of what's going on. A climate denier?
Oh, yeah.
And all these other. So then I called my attorney back and I said, Scott, I want you to get in touch with these rational wiki people because they have all these lies. Now, they took down the truth about me on Real Wiki. We call Rational Wiki. We can't do anything. So you see, I can't use their game against them. They could put up something fake about me. My attorney goes, hey, man, it's America. You can say what you want.
Yeah, it happens to me too.
Is it
happens
real? Nina Teichels, it happens to her. Nina and I cannot get blue checks next to our name on Twitter. And we've had everyone contact Twitter and they're like, well, we're just not handing out blue checks today. Really?
Yeah.
Okay. Yeah. So how does it happen to you? Because this has to end. You know, it can't just be one way. And that's what's going on. And that's why these people are winning at this stupid game of, oh, yeah, veganism doesn't cause climate change, when in fact it's 0.03 on one end and it's 2.4 on the other end, yet they're waving the flag and nobody's saying anything. What say you?
Well, I've had 2 pieces over the years, 2 hit pieces or 3 hit pieces. The one was by Johns Hopkins, by this group there, and that I've found that really disappointing because I wouldn't expect colleagues to go so low, but they did, but I don't have to go to that level, and I will not. The second one was an article in an outlet called Undark, and that was a journalist, and obviously she was doing that for someone else because the organization of that someone else was cited in this article over and over and over again. This was not an article about my research and criticizing my research. This was an article criticizing me personally. And that to me was just absolutely unacceptable. Okay? I mean, if somebody doesn't agree with my viewpoints or with my research or with, the way I conduct myself, that's one thing. But a personal hit piece that was new to me. And then later, there was one piece in the LA Times by a columnist, I think it was, and I had enough by that time, and so I wrote a little thread on Twitter, and I like to do that, and I think I do it fairly well. And I had 10 times more people reading my thing than people read his thing, but I responded this time, okay, because I was not amused to be mentioned in an article that was about something unrelated and just thrown in there into the LA Times. And so you have to know when in life it's worth fighting and when it's just not worth it. You know, in general, there are some people who are just really not worth it. And there's an old German saying, never wrestle with a pig. You both get dirty and the pig will like it. So all joking aside here, but if somebody is just, if somebody is substandard, then I will just not engage. If somebody is just critical or so, then I'm absolutely happy entertaining anything in a reasonable way. But if they start being unprofessional, then it's a good thing there are mute and block functions on social media, and I use those occasionally.
Yeah, whenever they get into ad hominem with me, I just move on. You know, it's like, okay, you're out of gas, and I'm not going to allow you to embarrass yourself any more than you already have. Tell me the difference. First off, in a nutshell, explain to me greenhouse gas. Pretend, again, I'm in kindergarten this time.
Yeah.
Explain what it is and why it's important or not important, or what's happening with it.
Right. So imagine the sun radiating down solar beams to the earth. And with it, of course, heat. When the solar beams hit the Earth, normally they would go and be reflected back into space. So it hits us, and then it goes back into space. Because of a layer of greenhouse gases in our atmosphere, gases such as carbon dioxide, CO2, or methane, and there are some others, because of this layer of greenhouse gases, the solar radiation that comes in and that's normally reflected back now cannot go back into space because these greenhouse gases pretty much form a blanket over our atmosphere, just like a blanket you put over your body on a cool summer evening, okay, to stay warm. These greenhouse gases form a blanket, and that blanket causes that solar radiation to stay in our atmosphere and the heat to accumulate. Okay, it's getting warmer because that blanket of greenhouse gases is getting too thick. And it's important that we have that blanket, that we have greenhouse gases, because otherwise it would be way too cold on Earth, okay? Right. The problem is we're putting too many of these greenhouse gases out. The blanket is now getting too thick. We're keeping too much of that solar radiation in our atmosphere, and that leads to global warming.
Okay, perfect. How do we get it too thin?
So there are different gases, okay, different greenhouse gases. The most abundant one, the one that is there in the largest amount, is CO2, carbon dioxide. And that is generated every time we burn oil, coal, gas. Every time you drive your car, if you have a combustion car, you burn gas, and the result is CO2 that comes out of the tailpipe. That CO2 has a lifespan, meaning it's in the atmosphere once it's there for 1,000 years. 1,000 years. So all the CO2 that you have always produced, Vinnie, every time you burn something, all that CO2 is still in the atmosphere. 1,000-year lifespan.
So it's going to go 10 times my lifetime if I live to be in my 90s.
Yeah.
Right.
Yeah. So pretty much everything that we have as humanity ever put out, because the last 1,000 years is really where we put the majority of greenhouse gases into the atmosphere.
Right.
The vast majority. All of that is still there. And every time we burn more fossil fuel, we put more CO2 into the atmosphere. So how is this the same or different from the most important greenhouse gas from animal agriculture? By far the most important one is methane. By far the most important one from animal agriculture is methane. Why is it so important? It is important because it's 28 times more heat trapping than CO2. Okay, one molecule of methane traps the heat 28 times better than CO2. This is almost like us going for a drink, okay? You drink a large glass of beer, and I drink the same volume of vodka. Mm-hmm. Obviously, I'll be, there will be difference as to
You'll be in the hospital and I'll be
gets,
really, really happy.
Exactly. So the same is true for these greenhouse gases, okay? So CO2 is less potent, but it has a very long lifespan. Methane has a lifespan of only 10 years though. And here's where the big difference exists. CO2 is only produced, but methane is both produced and destroyed. And both produced and destroyed almost at equal rate. I'll give you an
How? How is it destroyed?
It is destroyed because there is another molecule in the atmosphere called a radical. And this radical, it's called a hydroxyl radical to be precise. And these radicals, they take hydrogen away from this CH4, from this methane, and convert it back into CO2. So on the livestock side, it all starts with photosynthesis. Okay, it starts with photosynthesis and plants. What do plants need to grow? They need sunlight, they need water, and they need a form of carbon to grow. That carbon they pull out of the air during photosynthesis, and that's CO2. That's where the carbon comes from that plants need to grow cellulose or starch. Then a bovine comes along, a cow or so comes along and eats that grass. And then a part of the carbon that was in the grass, of the carbohydrate, is then converted into methane gas. Why? Because there are microbes in the rumen of that animal, in the stomach of that animal, that can digest cellulose. Monogastric animals like humans or pigs or chickens, they cannot digest cellulose. Ruminants can. But when they do digest it, they produce some methane.
Okay.
That methane is recycled carbon. It originated in the form of atmospheric CO2, which became carbohydrate, and now it's methane. That carbon stays in the air for 10 years in the form of methane and is then destroyed and converted back into CO2. So this is a recycling process. Very different from the carbon that comes from fossil fuels, which are oil, coal, and gas, which were in the ground for millions of years. We extracted them from the ground, we burned them, and by doing so, we're putting them into the atmosphere. That's a one-way street of carbon from the ground up into the air.
Right.
On the livestock side, a constant herd of livestock produces methane, but at a rate that is equal to the amount of methane that's destroyed.
Is that circle closed? Is it zero, or is there any plus or minus? It would have to be zero if it was part of the natural earth.
It depends. A stable livestock herd is pretty much zero. An increasing livestock herd is increasing methane. And if you decrease methane, beautiful things happen. Let me just give you one analogy. I think it's a really powerful one, okay?
Okay.
The analogy is for CO2, for carbon dioxide, and for methane, and how they affect the climate. I use a bathtub analogy. So first, the CO2 analogy. Imagine a bathtub that only has a faucet, but no drain. A faucet, but no drain. Every time you turn on that faucet, whether you just turn it on slightly or all the way, the level in the bathtub will rise. That's what happens to CO2 because that CO2 bathtub doesn't have a drain.
Right.
Okay. So this is why the CO2 levels globally and all over the world, really, why they always go up. On the methane side, we have something very different because methane is not just produced, but also destroyed through these radicals. That means there is a natural removal of methane, and that means the methane bathtub has a drain. That's the removal. So you now have a bathtub with both a faucet and a drain. If you turn that faucet on normally, normal way, then the amount of water you add and the amount of water that's going out through the drain are in balance, meaning there's no change in water levels. If you crank that faucet up all the way, then you might add more water than you subtract through the drain, and then levels go up. And that happens in part of the developing world where livestock herds grow drastically because human demand for animal source food is increasing. But
is there that's what I was going to go with the but. Well, how do we fix that?
But now comes the other thing. If you decrease methane, something wonderful happens because going back to the analogy, now you're turning the faucet on low, but your drain is still all the way open. And that means levels go down. And that's what happens when you reduce methane, then you're pulling carbon out of the atmosphere because in addition to this natural removal process, you are now also further removing on top of that. Now your levels, your warming can go down. Meaning, if you reduce methane, for example, from livestock, then you can offer a solution to that climate change problem. Now, you will ask me, is that possible? Can that be done? And the answer is absolutely, and we are doing it. Here in California, we have a very aggressive methane goal of reducing that gas by 40%, 40, by the year 2030.
How?
At first, our farmers thought, man, that must be a joke. How in the world can we ever achieve that? The state said, we will not fine you and threaten you and so on if you don't do it, but we want to incentivize you to do it. And so we want to help you get technologies on your farms to reduce methane. And they did. Those farmers partnered with the state and built covers over the manure storage. Okay, so where the manure of the animals is stored, they now built covers on top so that the gases that normally go into the air, and that these gases are not trapped. That mixture of gases is called biogas. 60% of that is methane, by the way. So that biogas is now trapped and then converted into fuel, into vehicle fuel called renewable natural gas. And you can now take that vehicle fuel and put it into semi-trucks to replace diesel. If you do that, convert the biogas from your farm, because you're trapping the manure storage, convert that biogas into fuel, then you receive what's called low carbon fuel standard credits. Now that's a mouthful. Low carbon fuel standard credits. These credits are so high that after a few years, your investment in this covered lagoon will break even, and then you will actually make a lot of money. Why? Because you are generating the most carbon negative fuel type there is, meaning you're pulling carbon out of the atmosphere and you're replacing fossil fuels with something that is biogenic. And that makes a lot of sense and is strongly financially incentivized. We have, in California, reduced our methane, the last 3 years, reduced our methane already by 25%.
Really?
Really. So we are over halfway in achieving our goal of 40%. We're over halfway there.
Well, maybe one day Coalinga is going to smell good.
So these are mainly the dairies doing that, and I tell you, I am impressed, because what this really does is the following: if we reduce methane so strongly, then that leads to negative warming, meaning cooling. Okay, a cooling effect.
Yeah.
That will counteract other greenhouse gases from these dairies and other livestock operations. And if you do that consistently, then over a period of maybe 5 to 10 years, you can get an entire sector, like a dairy industry in California, to be climate neutral, to not negatively impact the climate at all. That's what we should thrive. That's what we should try to attempt, helping our farmers to produce the food we need, the fiber we need, and so on, while also helping them to achieve other system services, such as carbon sequestration or reduction of greenhouse gases and so forth. That's what we should do. We need to work with them. These are the people who grow our food. They're not some criminals. They're often treated as such. They're the people who grow our food.
Frank, are there any other states coming on to this besides California?
I think that we will go this route nationwide next. I saw that the current administration is promoting the use of anaerobic digesters, which are these covered lagoons.
Oh, nice.
They're also, they're called anaerobic digesters. They're promoting that. They are coming up with a agricultural innovation mission. It's called AIM for Climate, and that is a federal system to assist farming to both reduce emissions, greenhouse gas emissions, and increase sequestration. And when I say that, I mean sequestration means that the plants that suck CO2 out of the air during photosynthesis pull that carbon through the plant, the above ground, into the below ground, the roots, and then from there it goes, from the roots, it goes into the soil. And that's where we want to keep it. Our soils can trap 1/3 of all greenhouse gases. 1/3 of all greenhouse gases, if those soils are treated well. meaning if you don't rip them every year with plows and tilling and so on. But if you are gentle with them through low till or no till, or there are different ways. Of course, incorporation of animal manure into the soil is very important to infuse nutrients into the ground and so forth. So I am very hopeful that the examples that we have set here in California will be adopted in other states. For once, we will not just be a laughingstock, but I hope a role model in helping us on the climate side of things.
No laughing stock when it comes to livestock. You guys can use that, okay? Just take that and go with it. No laughing stock when it comes to livestock. Listen, you can co-opt it. I just gave it to you. Use it. Do whatever you want. Hang on, I have one more big question for you, and I'll tell you what it is up front, but we're going to do it right after I tell everyone about our next sponsor. I want to ask you about electric cars, and if it matters, think about what you're going to say. Folks, Villa Capelli olive oil, longest running sponsor on the show, Villa Capelli. Listen, I don't care what Frank has to say. When it comes to eating something healthy, there is a fruit that I believe in. It's olives. More importantly, the juice that comes from olive oil. And guess what? In this country, we allow people to cut it up to 40% and still call it pure, natural, virgin, first press, cold press, blah, 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 olive oil. Well, guess what? It's not all true. But Villa Capelli has the real stuff. It comes right from Puglia. You get that little Puglia pinch. You always know when you're getting a good olive oil because it has that little peppery thing on the back of your throat. You will get that when you go to Villa Capelli, folks. Go check it out. And by the way, they have all kinds of herbs, the herbs de la Provence. I love everything from Villa Capelli, as you know. I love that they sponsor this show, and they have done for years. And whenever I do the phone consults with you guys, you all talk about it. It's like, oh, my God, look, I have my can of Villa Capelli right here. Go get Villa Capelli. And when I say can, get that 3-liter 10, because when you buy more volume, guess what? They can lower the price a bit, right? So get the 3-liter 10. If you spend more than $100, you get what? Oh, nothing, just free shipping. And that's a lot when you have a big 3-liter 10 of olive oil. You save a ton of money. But wait, there's more. Promo code Vinnie, VINNIE. That'll get you 10% off every single time. Promo code Vinnie, VINNIE, 10% off at Villa Capelli. Let them know we sent you. We're talking to Dr. Frank Mitloehner, and this has been one of the most fascinating podcasts I've done in a long time. Well, at least since noon today. Folks, I got one more. Frank, I try to keep people for an hour. You've been fascinated. I want to bring you back again if you would like to come back, because I could talk to you all day. One more question. We see everyone's driving a electric car. We hear more about electric cars. Now they come out with electric trucks and Jeeps, and everybody is doing these half electric, half, hybrids. You got your Prius, you got everything. But then there's all these batteries. Where are we on that? Or do you have any knowledge of this? Are we going to save the planet with electric cars?
Well, I believe that our entire transportation sector will be electrified, and it will not take very long. I think our state here will start doing this and only sell electric cars in 10 years from now. I think it's 2035. And I think that that's the way it will go. Okay, we will not burn petroleum type stuff in my children's lifespan. They will, once they are adults, once they are adults, they will say, "What? You guys burned oil? Are you kidding me? Why would you burn something as valuable as oil, which you can make into all of these plastics and fantastic stuff? Why did you guys burn that stuff?" And I will have to explain why we burned that stuff. It doesn't make much sense to burn oil. It just really doesn't. If you were to ask me, I would say, yes, we should electrify. I would also tell you that I think that we need nuclear. And there are now some very good type nuclear power plants, relatively small, but safe and clean and zero carbon and so forth. I drive a electric vehicle myself, and I can tell you that is a 10 times finer driving experience than compared to anything I've ever driven before. And I grew up in Germany. I grew up driving some nice vehicles, but I can tell you that's nothing alike the experience that you have in these things. But this is not about fun of driving as much as it is that we are just burning a huge amount of fossil fuel. And every time we do that, we add new additional carbon to the atmosphere. We can no longer afford that. So I'm happy that we are working on alternative systems, and some of them have real good promise. And so, I have a solar panel on my roof, and I have my house is off the grid, and I never have to go to a pump again and get gas, and I get all of that from the sun now. That feels good. It does feel good. And I'm not a tree hugger, but I tell you, that does feel good.
Listen, I'm all for the electric car. I'm waiting for a couple of things that, the batteries have to go a little longer. I'm a driver, Frank. I'll get in a car and go 1,000, 2,000 miles instead of getting on a plane.
Yeah.
And I know that might be crazy, and I'm waiting for that. As a matter of fact, I think I mentioned earlier in the show, I just purchased a new car today online through my brother, and I keep cars 10, 12 years. So, and I even thought about that. I went, this might be my last combustible engine. This could be it. Yeah. But the question I always have, and you sort of addressed it right there. People say, well, Vin, what do you have against the electric car? And I say, well, the batteries aren't there yet. I worry about, what we're going to do with these batteries, right? These lithium ion type batteries. And the other question I have is, the way we're producing electricity is still by using coal, and we do use some other, we use diesel or whatever, we use oil. I've always been for nuclear energy, and sometimes I mention that to some of my friends, and they go, no nukes, we're not going to do nukes. What are you, crazy? We're going to do nukes. And it's like, well, wait, what do you have against it? 3 Mile Island, Chernobyl, 3 Mile Island. What do you do? And I'm like, do you realize that it's not like that anymore? What say you?
Yeah, no, I agree with you totally. I am sold to the idea of using nuclear, and I think nuclear and renewables as well will be the thing of the future. And we have to divorce ourselves from fossil fuels. That's my opinion, and I know it's not always popular with people, but I can tell you from what I know, every time we use those fossil fuels, we are taking carbon from down there and we're putting it up there, and we cannot afford that. I do research this kind of thing, and carbon emissions and so on. I can tell you our carbon emissions are going up and up and up and up, and the reason for that is, by and large, the use of fossil fuels. To those people who don't like livestock, they will soon have to look for other topics as to why livestock is so terrible for us or for our planet, because that climate narrative, I think, will dissipate. I have seen some methane satellite images recently for the United States, and the hotspots were in locations where nobody would expect them, okay, because everybody is now so focused on the idea that it's our cattle doing this. So everybody is looking to the Panhandle of Texas and the San Joaquin Valley of California and so on. But you will find it in all those places where we are involved in fracking, and where we have pipelines that are leaking and so on. That's where you find all that methane in large quantities. Okay, large quantities. Right. It's not to say that livestock, of course, does produce greenhouse gas. There's no question. Okay, both animal agriculture and plant agriculture do produce these gases. But we need to eat. We need to eat, and we can eat that stuff that we want while reducing its footprint. And that's my entire focus, okay? Acknowledging that there are contributions of, let's say, cattle, quantifying those contributions, and then mitigating those contributions, because we're not stopping to eat animal source foods. We're not stopping to eat animal source foods. No matter what the activist side says, we are not going to change that anytime soon.
There you have it, folks. Frank, hang on. I want to say goodbye to you off the air. Folks, if you like what's going on here, you know what to do. We all go shopping on Amazon. I'm sure Amazon is putting some kind of emissions out there. I'm just not sure what it is yet, but I'll figure it out. But in the meantime, folks, we all shop on Amazon. Before you go to Amazon, please go to VinnieTortorich.com, click through the banner, puts a little coal on the fire, gets my train down the track. I'm able to keep the show free for a gazillion years in a row. We also have the Superfan page there. You can check that out. You can also find Dr. Mitloehner all over the place. Go check him out on Twitter. He's at, where is it, Frank?
GHG Guru.
GHG Guru. I will go there. Frank, I don't think we're friends on Twitter, but we will be tonight. We're going to be tag teaming each other, brother. Oh my God. I love Frank. Frank loves me. Everyone hates me and Frank. That kind of thing. So go check out GHG Guru on Twitter. Where else can they find you, Frank?
Well, I am also the director of the CLEAR Center here at UC Davis. CLEAR, as in see-through, CLEAR Center at UC Davis. And so that's on the web, of course, clear.ucdavis.edu.
Frank, please promise me you're going to come back again. This has been an absolute, as they say, a piece of kugel.
Yeah, the pleasure was on my side. I would love to. Thank you.
I appreciate it. Folks, on behalf of Dr. Frank Mitloehner, my name is Vinnie Tortorich. Put life into living and do it with enthusiasm.